Lindsey Halligan, Trump's handpicked prosecutor in the James Comey case, is having a bad week. The whole case is kind of falling apart. You have the U.S. Magistrate Judge that's overseeing the case slamming the Justice Department and the prosecutors for basically doing a indict first and investigate later strategy and not turning over evidence that James Comey is entitled to. The judge is shutting that down, not allowing this to go forward. It's just really not going well for Halligan and Trump and all the people trying to do these political prosecutions. I'm Shant Karnikian. This is Civil Action. We're going to unpack what happened today on the show. If you like the Legal AF Network, if you like our videos, hit that subscribe button so you can support us. Hit that like button too and share this with whoever you think might find it useful. Brian, where do you want to start with this issue?
Well, I think some interesting revelations have come out about this, and I've repeatedly refused to Lindsey Halligan as third runner-up because in her past, she was the third runner-up for Miss Colorado. And so I'm going to continue to refer her that way.
You like that phrase about her, but because
I do. I mean, look,
that's her other qualification aside from, being someone that Trump likes and did favor for.
I mean, what's come out in this case and what came out in this hearing is that she's made a number of rookie errors, apparently, when she presented this to the grand jury. So first of all, the judge chided her for, or the lawyers on the other side have chided her for the fact that this was her first ever grand jury presentation. She had never made a presentation to a grand jury before. She kept the grand jury after hours. And so people have to understand a grand jury, there's no defendant present.
Yeah.
So it's all based on what the prosecutor says. And the prosecutor can persuade a grand jury to do almost anything. We have a saying that a grand jury could indict a ham sandwich, meaning that, it doesn't take very much for a grand jury to act. And she kept them there after hours, which put, undue pressure on him because the statute of limitations was going to run the next day. If she didn't get an indictment, she was never getting an indictment out of this and never be able to do anything with this. But they also said how odd it is that she went in and did this completely on her own without anyone with more experience. And of course, anyone with more criminal experience would be someone who worked in the office 2 days because she had been there, I guess, 1 day at that point.
And she did it personally herself, by the way. I want to point that out, which is kind of weird because she's the U.S. attorney. Yes, it is her job, but that's like, I don't know, that's like the mayor of the city going out and like kind of fixing a pothole themselves or something like that. Like, yes, it is within their purview to do it, but they don't literally go out and do it. That's how sort of entry level a grand jury indictment is, as Brian explained.
So this brings us forward, Shant, to what, just has happened now. Is that in the Comey case, there's now been a hearing in front of a magistrate judge. This is not a U.S. district court judge. It's a someone who's appointed by the district court judges to hear like discovery matters and motions, pretrial motions.
But they're still a judge. Their rulings have the same force and effect as any type of judge. Yeah, absolutely.
And this judge, Judge Fitzpatrick, heard apparently there's a ton of evidence that the government hasn't turned over to Comey's to defense team. They haven't turned it over.
There's a trove of evidence that they've been sitting on for years. But why should they turn it over, Brian? What they get to surprise him at trial, right? Maybe they just drop it on him at trial.
Good time for a law lesson, which is the Sixth Amendment of the United States Constitution, which is consistently referred to as the Confrontation Clause, says that you don't get to prosecute someone in the United States without giving them everything, inculpatory and exculpatory evidence, everything you have. You don't get to sit there as a prosecutor and say, well, I'm going to give this, but I'm not going to give this because this hurts my case, right?
Yep. They have the right to, yes, as you explained, Confrontation Clause, speedy trial, notice of what they're being accused of. But one of the most fundamental components is exactly what Brian says. You have to turn over everything, even if it's exculpatory, even if it kills your case, you have to turn it over because even in the civil world, we have this principle of it's not trial by ambush. You can't drop evidence on people. You don't have to reveal your strategy, but whatever evidence you have that you're going to use against the other side, or the side that's defending themselves is going to use, you're entitled to it. But in the criminal world, it's even more important because what's at stake here is someone's personal freedom. It's their due process. They can be, criminally in trouble. They could be imprisoned, worst comes to worst.
And this goes back to the founding of the country, which is these violations of the Confrontation Clause and the rights were something that occurred regularly when the United States was simply a colony of England, right? So what happened here is all this evidence, and incidentally, what sort of prompted this was the government released a pleading and some press information trying to show how guilty Comey is, information that Comey's lawyers had never had.
Yeah, that's right.
Got a hold of.
That's just some wild stuff, man. Yeah. So they released information, and it's stuff that Comey doesn't even have, meaning his legal team doesn't even have. So Judge Fitzpatrick ordered that all of that stuff be turned over, along with an explanation of how they were obtained too, and what was reviewed, and whether or not maybe possibly attorney-client privilege was violated. So there's even more to it than just turn it over. It's like, turn it over and, tell us how you got this. I think one of the lines, he cut off the attorney, the DOJ attorney, and he said something like, "Why should you get the first crack at this?" And that's absolutely true, especially in the criminal world. Why should they get it? It should be equally available to the other side, to the criminal defendant whose freedom is at jeopardy here. And in this case, for bullshit reasons too.
Well, and one of the things, the judge made certain statements from the bench that really call into question where this is going to go for the government. I mean, I think I know where it's going to go for the government, but remember, at the core of this is the notion of a vindictive prosecution. That this prosecution was prompted by the fact that Trump was telling Pam Bondi to prosecute this guy and get it done before the statute of limitations and get this out. And then Lindsey Halligan, also known as the third runner-up, was appointed at the last minute to this office. She's been challenged whether or not she's qualified. That's not necessarily the challenge. The challenge is whether or not her appointment was legal in the first place. And that these information, these documents are now raising real questions about whether or not his due process rights are simply being violated. I mean, the judge didn't rule on the vindictiveness. He didn't rule on whether the prosecution was legal, but there were certainly comments that came out.
I think that's still out there. That's pending. The vindictive prosecution motion is pending, and we'll cover that. But
so a question for you, Shant, is, in the light of this order that the judges made, turn everything over and, follow the law and follow the constitutional obligations to due process. Is it true that the government, the Department of Justice, the Trump people, that they immediately turned everything over to Comey and his lawyers?
That's funny. I was going to ask you that because this is kind of our shtick. No, they didn't. They turned around. They filed an emergency appeal. They filed an emergency appeal to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, claiming that the order forced them to disclose sensitive investigation material and risk revealing grand jury secrets. Kind of bullshit arguments.
Right. Well, not just bullshit arguments.
They disagree.
Not just bullshit arguments, Shant, but actual justification for why prosecutions get dismissed. Because at some point, the government's prosecuting somebody and they say, we can't produce evidence because it's government secrets, it's the CIA, it's who knows, it's, Donald Trump's plans to redo the bathrooms in the White House. We can't turn that over. At that moment, the judge is usually obligated to dismiss the prosecution because you, the prosecution, has to make a decision.
Yeah.
Right. You're either going to give the information and comply with the law, or you're going to dismiss the charges.
Right. So, unlike in the civil world where we practice, where we have to prove our case as the person representing the injured party or the victim, in the criminal world, the burden's on the prosecution. They have to prove guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant, Comey in this instance, is innocent, presumed innocent until proven guilty. So they have the burden. And if you say, well, I would prove it, but it's secret. These documents, I can't show you these. And the judge goes, well, you can't prove your case, dismissed. So that might be ultimately what happens here if they refuse to produce it and if they refuse to turn this stuff over and provide an explanation for how they got it. So we'll see how that shakes out. That'll happen any moment now. In fact, the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals ruling on this emergency appeal that they scrambled to file. It's just wild.
I don't know what to say.
And we'll stay tuned also for what happens with the vindictive prosecution motion in this vindictive prosecution that's happening.
Yeah, that hearing's set for November 13th, by the way.
It is. Okay. Yeah. So we'll keep posted on that. Stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you find this kind of useful to unpack all the legal issues that are sort of behind the politics here, or the legal system that Trump's trying to hijack and use for political purposes. I'm Shant Karnikian. That's Brian Kabateck over there. A couple of lawyers based out of California. If you have any questions for us, reach out to us. This is Civil Action on the Legal AF Network. If you like the content, if you like the other stuff here on Legal AF, please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, share with us your feedback, reach out to us. We're actually very nice. See you on the next one.
Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.